Listen up, you bunch of crazies. This is Matt Norrin Radd Creamer, and you're listening to XVGM. Get in here, you bunch of rascals.
Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 96, Slayin 2, with composer Matt Creamer, a.k.a. Norrin Radd, a return guest. Thanks for joining us, Matt, so we can chat up your ear about what is potentially your best soundtrack.
I would agree.
This is a killer soundtrack.
It is.
People listening will find out by the time we get to the end, but
Yes.
I have to say you are in for a treat.
Indeed, yes. This one I've been talking to Matt about for just
Literally
years.
months.
Literally years.
Damn.
He sent me the original version of the soundtrack, like the pre-finished build of it, because we were chatting about it, and I was just like blown away. After the game came out, I downloaded it and really loved it. Like, it was so good. You know, it's one of those experiences that's like, it's a retro styled game, but it has a very like it's a great mix between a modern and a retro soundtrack. It's got all the melody and charisma of a retro soundtrack, but it's got all the fine tunings of a modern style retro game soundtrack.
Yeah, and I gotta
Like
say,
your Shovel Knights and, you know,
you hear a lot of that in the tracks that we just came in on, which was a double track.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? It was
that was a attract mode intro, which is just like almost like an arcade game where they have the attract mode, and then the title screen, which is actually a throwback to Slayin 1. See, I did my homework.
Yeah, you've done your homework.
That's it. That's how we do on XVGM. Slayin 1 was a mobile game only, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that they brought you in for that game. You did the soundtrack for that one. And I'm assuming that they were like, all right, let's bring him back because he's just so good. Let's bring him back for Slayin 2. Was there anything in particular that they were like, we want you to do this differently, or we want you to include the original like theme or motif for that in the second game soundtrack?
Yeah, definitely. So it was a one developer. He developed the whole game. He did all of Slayin. He was the developer, and FDG was the publisher.
Pixel Licker is the developer.
Pixel Licker, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he came back, and originally FDG wasn't going to pick up Slayin 2 to be like a game again, and he was going to just develop it on his own. So he contacted me separately and wanted me to come back for the game. And so it was him and I working for a while, and then he eventually kept pitching it to them until they're like, all right, we'll take it.
Nice.
We'll take it and run with it. But that was one of the few things he was like, I want that. Can we make that intro like into, you know, the I mean, I had to prototype on the soundtrack. There's a track at the end called like original pitch or something like that. It's like it's my original pitch. I sent him like, what about this? Is this a good prototype? Because that's how every project starts for you. Basically, just throwing prototypes at him. Like, what does this sound like? You know, like try something with FM bass, try something with real bass, try guitars and blah blah. And that was the first time it stuck. Where it's like, we need real guitars. That's what he was originally going to get me to record real guitars. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I can record what's in my head as cleanly as I need to. So the whole thing was basically sequence. sequenced on piano with like samples of actual guitar playing.
Oh wow!
Well, they've got it really good now, where like you can hit one key and it's like one strike on a guitar, and then you sequence it all to sound like you're doing all the guitar techniques like palm mutes and hammer-on pull-offs and stuff. So
oh wow!
I was able to treat it a lot like a chiptune. So it was like, all right, we finally found the protocol. I'm going to write it like a chiptune soundtrack, but it's going to be a rock arrange of a chiptune soundtrack. So in my brain, I was basically like, okay, write the chiptune first and then do a rock arrange of what I'm hearing in my head.
Okay.
And then sequence that. So that was the one where I'm like, I remember he's like, I need this title screen to be in the rock format. I'm like, I can't do it. The gallop, it doesn't work. And that was a really hard thing to pull off, but because it didn't sound cool to me. And I just fluked out with that intro part, like, dan, da, 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 da. Yeah. It was just something, I was watching some tutorial video on YouTube where they were showing you how to do this chord progression, and I tried it on my own keyboard. I'm like, that sounds like the intro, and it made it so I could actually turn the original 8-bit Slayin track into a rock track. It all worked out. It was a goddamn miracle.
As far as the chiptune, did you actually record, and is there like a finished version of some of these songs in like an 8-bit like NES style?
A great question. Yeah. No, what I'm basically doing is in my head, I'm basically running two processes where it's like, just by natural default, my natural way of writing music is always going to be chiptune, like chords on a piano. I don't think I've ever hit a chord on a piano and then hit another chord, like a chord progression. Yeah. In my head, I'm always thinking like NES, where it's like two melodies have to play at the same time. And if they happen to, generate some sort of chord structure, that's fine. But like the NES they could only hit two notes at a time and maybe a bass note. So at most, you'd only ever hear three notes. So usually Nintendo's two melodies playing at once with a bass line underlying like the sort of chord progression. Yeah. And so that's the way I write everything, because I don't hear chords in my head. I hear melodies. And so that's what I did for this soundtrack. So I'm hearing the melodies in my head and having to say like, all right, before I write that as a chiptune, what would it sound like as guitar riffs? So it's like, that's palm mutes, that's hammer-on pull-offs, that's, legato. So it doesn't hurt that I play guitar my whole life, but it was just funny to come the other way around, because in like 2004 and 2005, I started covering Nintendo music on guitar. I have a bunch of like guitar arranges. And so that was me taking Nintendo music and saying like, well, what does this sound like on guitar? And so I just did basically the reverse process from like, what does the thing I'm hearing in my head sound like on guitar? Like,
really we talked about this before, I'm pretty sure, on the last episode that we did when we had you on, which was the Shakedown Hawaii, or it might have been when we did a Patreon exclusive episode where we did a live show with you, and we might have talked about it there too. But the very first, talking about guitar, the very first thing I ever heard from you was way back when on OCR Remix, when you did a cover of Guile's theme. And it was all like guitar, and like I still have it on my phone. It still comes up. I still rock out to it. It's great. I remember talking to you about it before, and you were like, oh no, please. Like you were so embarrassed by it. It was so funny. But it's just funny to see you go back to that kind of style, because after that, I didn't really hear of anything that you really did until you did Retro City Rampage. And once I heard that, I was like, who's this guy? And then I realized, oh wait, that's Jake Kaufman. Then I heard your stuff and was like, oh my god, this is also awesome, which was, I think, Do or Die, I think is the name of the track, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a banger.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my god, who's this guy? And then I found out about you, and ever since then, it's been like, yo, this dude's awesome. So what do you think about this song?
It was pretty cool. I mean, both of them. So again, it was two tracks. I will say the Attract track was exactly what I would have expected. If I was walking through an arcade and I heard that, I would definitely stop and be like, what's going on over here? Yeah. Very frantic, but like that's what you want to do in an arcade, is you want to get your sound out there and make sure it sounds good to get people to check out the rest of it.
For sure.
And then that title was just epic. And I was going to ask, and then you already confirmed what you were talking about. I was like, I think I was hearing galloping bass in there, and you mentioned that you were, I guess you were having a little bit of trouble with the galloping, but it sounded really good, and it was subtle. Like, it wasn't just like a lot of the galloping bass stuff that we talk about and we listen to.
Sure.
It's very, very blatant.
Right.
And the fact that it was subtle and it played in with the rest of the melody and the rest of what was going on, I thought it was really cool. Like, I like when I have to question things. It's great when I'm just like, oh yeah, that's this. Yeah. But when I'm like, oh, I think I hear this thing.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen, because I'm gonna be honest, that melody and the synth and everything really, like, that locked me in, man. Yeah. Like, all I was listening to was that like really uplifting, soaring melodies. It's what you come to expect from Matt Creamer, of course, but on top of that, there is nothing better than hearing a really solid title track like this. So it really kind of lets you know, hey, this game's going to kick butt right from the beginning, and here's why. You know, it was hard to pick between the two, so I was like, screw it. We're just going to play both. They're both pretty short.
Yep.
Let's move on to our next pick. I guess we'll go back and forth with what you and I have picked out.
Yeah, because we're both kind of all over the place in what we got here.
Yeah, for sure.
Where it comes from.
Like, I definitely went for... So, I picked my first 3, and then I was like, I'm going to hold off because I don't want to pick all the bangers. I was like, I don't want to be that guy and just be like, here's a rocker, here's a rocker, here's a rocker. So I was like, let me hold off and let me let Justin pick stuff.
They're all bangers.
They are all bangers, but rockers.
Oh, you.
There's a difference between a banger and a rocker.
Yep.
So my natural nature is go with the rockers all the time. And you seem to pick a little bit more stuff with like a little bit more range, a little bit different stuff than I would have picked, which just, I think, complements like both of our styles.
That's how our show works.
Right, exactly. So as soon as you picked all your tracks today, I was like, okay, let me run in and grab the other 2 rockers that I wanted to pick. So
Nice.
But I told Matt this, and I'll tell you, the audience, this. It was so difficult to pick tracks for this episode. Is what it is. So we're going to do something special for you guys. Matt has generously given us 6 copies of the soundtrack digitally. So we are going to offer them up to you after the show. So after you listen to the show, go to our social medias. There'll be links down below. There's going to be one digital soundtrack code for each of our social medias.
Yep.
So Facebook, Twitter, Discord,
Instagram,
and YouTube.
And first person to comment.
And email. That's 6.
And email.
Yeah.
So the first person to comment or email.
Tell us your favorite song.
Tell us your favorite song and why.
Yes.
And we will respond with
a code.
Free code to download the soundtrack.
Yeah, we'll DM you or... Yeah.
And this is a 36 track soundtrack, just so that people know. Like, we really struggled to pick our favorites because there's so many tracks and they are all really good.
Yes.
So you're only getting a taste.
Anyways, let's get to it. Our first pick today is Swarms of the Eastern Grassland by our guest of honor, Matt Creamer. Oh man, what a banger. That was Swarms of the Eastern Grassland off of Slayin 2 from our guest of honor, Matt Creamer. Yes. Oh man, I love this song. This was, I think, the first song that I listened to off the soundtrack that you provided that I was like, oh my goodness, I can't wait for this game to come out. Because, man, the shreddiness, the constantly like elevating levels of melody. It's going to be really hard for me to talk about this because it's like trying to describe why I love Iron Maiden.
Okay.
You know, like, yeah, I could go with the generic, like, galloping bass and this and that and the soaring vocals and blah, blah, blah. But, like, It's one of those soundtracks that's like, you listen to it, and for me at least, all the hairs kind of stand up inside my head. Like, not even the outside hairs, but like the inside hairs.
Okay.
You know, it's weird, but it only happens on my head and the back of my neck. And like, you, especially if you put it on in the car, and then you're just like rocking out, you know, to the point where like, oh man, I really should pay attention to
the road.
Yeah. But I love that melody of the entire part, and the guitars, the, you know, different octaves, you know, the that just like every moment in the song that I'm like, oh man, like he hit the peak, like now it's gonna drop down. And it only really drops down once you get that pulsing kind of synth bass that kind of comes in right during the loop, the do 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 do, and then you get it brought back in. So it's got this like synth wave, synth metal melody kind of thing that's going on with it. It's
like peanut butter and chocolate.
Peanut butter and chocolate. Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah. So you hear a lot of this in the opening tracks that we played as well, but the blend of like what sound like real instruments and like chiptune or like synthesizers, and like I hear a lot more quote unquote real instruments in the bass and a lot more synth in like the main melody, and it is a really cool blend because like I'm listening and like my ears are kind of bouncing between like, oh yeah, like hear like that real bass and like the percussion and everything else, and then like getting the nostalgia out of like all the synthesizer, and like it's a mega bit of nostalgia because it's not just one thing. Like there's a lot of, I grew up in the 80s, like what synthwave is all like, you know, respect to the synth sounds of like the movies in the 80s, and I love that stuff. So like I'm getting a lot of like Nintendo Genesis, I'm getting a lot of video game and like 80s movies vibes, and it's just it like all just kind of like bubbles up.
Yeah, Shakedown Hawaii in the beginning, it sounds like a lot of stuff from like Shakedown Hawaii that he did.
Oh yeah.
Where it's a lot of like the 80s movie kind of like Scarface, you know, with that pulsating bass. But once it picks up, man, it's just straight up metal. And you know, I know Matt's a metal guy too, so it's right up his alley. It's right up our alley. So I don't know. Now that we've like not shut up about this song, tell me what you were thinking about when you composed this one.
It's hard to remember what the developer specifically asked for, but every one of the levels in this game, Pixel Licker really wanted each level to have like sort of context to it, like a story-driven reason for why you're there, or something. I can't remember what exactly he wanted with this one, but I wasn't just left to my own devices, like write another banger. Like this one he wanted, because otherwise that's what I'd be doing. Like, final boss theme, 10 final boss themes in a row. That'll be my track. But this one, I can't remember exactly what he was asking for, but you guys really, you know, you actually brought it up, Justin, that it made me remember when we were prototyping for this game. Like the first game was an 8-bit game, so it was easy to prototype that. It's like write 8-bit music, and I know how to do that already. But when you pull back the curtain, it's like, well, there's no limitation anymore. What's your protocol now? It's like for a guy like me, that becomes really hard because I'm not writing chords. So I have to come up with like sort of a new protocol. So I had a couple of things I was using for this soundtrack, and you exactly mentioned it. Like sometimes it sounds real, sometimes it sounds synthesized, and what I was basically doing was, okay, I want to have a real bass that I can use sometimes, and I want to have a synth bass I can use sometimes, and I want to also combine them sometimes. And so some songs in this soundtrack used always the same real bass patch, like sounds like a real bass. Some songs always used like an FM bass sound, like right off the Sega Genesis, and sometimes I would mix them together. And on a few soundtracks, I think it was either this one or one of the other Grassland ones. There's a lot of Grassland tracks
in
this
game.
There is.
I know.
Eastern Grassland, Southern Grassland, just the regular Grasslands. But one of them was actually just like an actual synth bass patch that I probably did use on Shakedown Hawaii, because funny thing too, I wrote both these soundtracks at the exact same time, and they both took 3 years to write.
Oh wow.
Both projects just kept like expanding out. So I was like, all right, today I'm writing Slayin 2, and then it would be literally next day I'm writing Shakedown Hawaii. And during those two projects, I wrote like 4 or 5 other projects at the same time. And at one point, actually did have 5 soundtracks I was working on at the same time. So I would come in and sit down and be like, different composer, different hat, like let's go. So there's bound to be some spillover.
That makes
but
sense.
Yeah, that was basically what I was trying to do. And the other thing, I wanted to mix orchestral stuff in the soundtrack as well. And my basis for that was like, hey, you remember that Metallica thing they did with that whole orchestra where it was like
S&M,
televised or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I remember I stayed up. I don't even necessarily like Metallica like as a whole, but there's obviously great tracks. And I was just up stupidly late in like grade 11 or grade 12 in Canada. That was just on TV, and I had to stay up and watch the whole thing. I'm like, this is out of control. This is completely out of hand. Like they did Battery with an orchestra. Like that is out of hand, crazy. So I kind of
Cats and dogs, mass hysteria.
living together.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that was basically all I had to go by. I'm like, I know it can be done, and I didn't reference Metallica at all. I'm just like, well, let's see if I can combine that as well. So that was all part of my protocol for what the soundtrack should sound like.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The fact that you have real bass and FM bass in there is just crazy. Just like you said, like cats and dogs, mass hysteria, living together.
Well, get this. To add to that, you guys know the song "We Built the City on Rock and Roll"?
Sure.
Oh, of course.
All right. If you guys ever listen to that track again, try and listen to where it's like that's a real bass, that's an FM bass, and they do the exact same thing where it's like real bass here, FM bass here,
Oh, that's
and then
true.
they combine it sometimes too. And that's where I got the idea. I'm like, I think in the 80s, everyone just added a little bit of FM bass behind their real bass player, just a little bit, because it gave you that metallic sort of 80s vibe. Like it always had that weird digital sound to it. So I wanted to toy with that.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what they did, but I'm like, I'm going to try that. So you basically just mix them together, compress them together, and have them sort of equal one sound and see if it works.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right. Well, we're of course going to talk about the game, but Justin's going to pick a track. So
Yeah.
what do we got?
We are going to next listen to Remains of the Burned Forest from Slayin 2 by Matt Creamer. Welcome back. That was Remains of the Burned Forest from this 2020 game called Slayin 2. So this came out on the Switch and was composed by our guest of the evening, Mr. Matt Creamer.
Oh man.
Oh, yeah, this...
That oh man was for Matt.
Oh, I mean, that
Not
oh man
the
is
song.
for,
No, I'm
everything.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, I picked this song because I thought it was a Mike song. No.
I remember when I first heard this song for you picking it, because I went and listened to it, and I have not heard the song yet in the game. I don't believe. I know, because if I had heard it, I would have stood straight out to me. Very clearly sounding like a boss theme, and I know we joked earlier that you basically would just write a million boss themes. Is this the boss theme in the game? I don't know.
No, but this is a late level track in the game, and we wrote the music in the game basically sequentially from kind of the most lighthearted levels all the way to the end of the game. Like it's basically like 5 levels in a row where it just keeps getting more and more intense. And this was like second to last or third to last level.
That's why I haven't heard it.
Yeah, this feels like an end game level. I mean, aside from just the name, I mean, when you take the name of the track and Remains of the Burned Forest, I mean, it evokes in me like you are trying to get out. Like there's something going on. I mean, Remains of the Burned Forest, it seems like, something's already happened, but in my mind, like the forest is still on fire and you are trying to escape. under, over, out, or through, however it is, like you need to get the heck out. Either you're being chased or, you know, the force is on fire behind you. Like it's very frenetic. Like right all up front, you've got this crazy fast synth going on, and it just like, it really gets me in the like anxiety mode of like, oh my god, we gotta go.
Yeah.
And then it kind of mellows out towards the middle, but like it keeps that energy pretty much all the way through.
I just love the shreddiness of the guitar. But I also noticed this for the first time hearing it through headphones in the background. During that part, you've got this, I don't know what it is. It almost sounds like some sort of a percussion instrument that's matching the melody. That and it's like cracking skulls. I really
Like
don't know.
Like, what do you mean
I don't
percussion
know.
instrument?
It's some kind of like percussion at the very, like if you play it back and you listen to it, it's really subtle in the background. What is that? Is that a percussion instrument?
Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you picked up on that. I really like that as well, because, you know, that's the old chiptune artist in me, where it's like you don't just repeat a pattern, you know, 4 times and then move to the next. You got to be adding to the pattern while you're repeating it 4 times. So that's me. Okay, I've done it 2 times in a row here. The second 2 times, I got to add something. So what I added there was a wood block.
That's it.
But
Okay.
usually wood blocks are just one note, like
Right.
But I'm pretty sure I got that wood block from retro video games somewhere. You know, there's just files out there, like an old degraded wood block sound that I can put in my own synthesizer and then play. Like if it's tuned, if it's an actual note, the wood block hits, then you can tune it and then make it so your keyboard can play it at any key. And as long as you don't go too far away from the original recording note, it sounds pretty good. So, you know, like I can do the same notes myself.
Yeah, that checks out. All I
That's
could
really
picture is a gnome playing with like 2 sticks on a wood block, like just up and down all over it, just getting different sounds. Like when you hit a glass when it's like half full, or like if you've got a bunch of different glasses and you're just like going crazy with the spoons to make like different noises.
Yeah.
That's what I pictured, just one giant wood block and a gnome wearing like the golden axe like little hat, and you know, that's what I picture. So
Fair enough.
let's talk about this game before we get any
Yeah.
crazier with the music. So Slayin 2 is the sequel to Slayin.
Wait, what?
Yes, believe it or not. Slayin was a mobile game, but this is exclusive to the Switch at this point in time.
It's basically a mobile platform.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess, yeah. Slayin returns, and this time you can bring a friend. So it's not just single player. Now you can bring your buds for local drop-in, drop-out multiplayer. You play as up to 8 unlockable characters, and they all have different like moves, like skill sets and play styles. For the most part, it's all medieval style. So it's all like, you know, hero, like warriors and wizards and, you know,
Princesses?
yeah, like they have ninjas.
Ooh.
They have like sorceresses and stuff like that. So they all have different abilities. And what you do is after you beat the first few levels as just playing as the like generic knight, you could change like, you know, between like a white knight or a black knight, you know, like in terms of their skin color or whatever, and like their outfits change too. Once you get to a certain part of the game, it unlocks the town. So you go to this town and you can kind of run all over the town to like meet other heroes, and you could pay them like whatever it is, 1,000 coins or something like that, and they'll join your rank. So then you can pick before each level, you could pick between different heroes. You can level their weapons up, you can level their magic abilities up, you know, all their different things. And that's kind of the basic style or whatever of what you're doing in the game.
What's the genre? Because so far what you've described to me
Sure.
is almost Castle Crash.
Yeah.
And I know it's not. And I'm not knocking anything.
Yeah,
I know it's not it. So.
It's, I guess you could say it's an action RPG because there's stuff that you can level up, like all the abilities and whatnot. But it takes a lot of inspiration from Ys, like the older Ys games, in the sense that it's like that bump mechanic for attacking. So what you do is you run left to right, and it's a single screen. Each level has a different like visual aesthetic. So like sometimes you're in the swamp, sometimes you're in the grassland, sometimes you're in the desert, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There's a foreground and a background, very similar to like Guardian Heroes, like that type of style, where you can press a button and you'll flip back and forth between the two. But it's a single screen like that with those 2 different layers. And what you're essentially trying to do is run through enemies in the same style as Ys, the first 2 games. There's the one complaint that I do have about it is there's no real like physical feedback in terms of you getting hit. So you'll run through an enemy and you'll see your health bar like drain. You won't like get any kind of haptic feedback like in the controller. Your character won't bounce backwards, so to speak. There's some rare exceptions where I think if like you bump into a shield, like a specific type of thing like that, like you might bounce back a little bit. Yeah. But for the most part, you're just running left and right, blowing through enemies, and that's pretty much like the style of gameplay. The stronger you become, the easier it is to blow through the enemies. And there's also strategies for beating the bosses too, because after each level, like you'll get treasure chests and stuff that you'll have to like get different power-ups like speed or invulnerability and stuff like that. And eventually, if you beat enough the enemies, you'll unlock the boss, and then the boss comes down. You got to defeat the boss. If you defeat the boss, then you move on to the next stage. So there's a world map, and that's where you kind of move all over the place. You get like the dots that draw to the next area or whatever. The map it's pretty simplistic for the most part, but it's a really fun game. Like I bought this for Matt's soundtrack for the game itself, and then afterwards, like I played the game, and I was like, oh, this game's actually fun. Okay, good. Okay, awesome.
Always a treat.
So now I have a good game with a good soundtrack. So I'm happy. So we'll talk a little bit more about the game as we go through. But so definitely check it out. It currently costs $11.99 unless there's some kind of super sale. But it's $11.99
on the Switch.
On the Switch.
Nice. Yeah. Pick that up tonight when I go home. Actually.
Yeah, it's super worth it. Yeah, I'm pretty far into it, but I haven't beaten it yet. So next pick is gonna be Hordes based in the Lagoon. So we're stepping away from the grasslands, jumping into the lagoon.
All right, taking a dip.
All right, let's do it. All right, thanks for joining us back on our Slayin 2 episode with composer Matt Creamer. That was Hordes Based in the Lagoon, and it's off the May 7th, 2020 release of Slayin 2. Oh man, yeah, so good. Love that guitar work there. So I did notice what I believe is a pan flute way in the background, like maybe about halfway through.
Shakuhachi.
Ooh,
Shakuhachi.
Ooh,
that's
fancy.
like the ninja one. That's the one you'd hear in all the ninja games.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Shakuhachi flute. Okay.
It was the one that they always like threw in like Ninja Gaiden or like Shinobi or whatever, where they'd have like that like that, yeah. But it always sounded 8-bit, so you never knew what it was. But there you go, that's what it is.
That's really cool, and I appreciate that you called that out too, because you said Shakuhachi, and I was like, oh, really?
He knew exactly where we were going.
It's not a shamisen, clearly.
No, not a shamisen.
No, but yeah, we're gonna have to add a shakuhachi emoji to our Discord.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool though. I got some mega. I'm using the word mega a lot tonight, but I'm getting some mega prog rock vibes out of this. I always take notes when I'm listening, and I wrote down total prog rock, Dream Theater. Like there's a few bits in here that just remind me of some of my favorite bits from scenes from memory and stuff like that. Curious if that was if I'm picking up on the right vibes, or if you were going for something else, or if this was like a little prog rock influenced.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not necessarily a dream theater. I'm more like tech metal. But
Okay.
or like 70s Italian prog. That I kind of go from between those two. But
Yes.
yeah, it all and everywhere in between, it all kinds of meets in the same spot. So yeah, definitely prog influenced a lot of this one. This one was like the lagoon was like the swampy, jungly level, and it was just supposed to be the kind of the least structured song. I felt like it was just supposed to be like kind of chaos, like vines everywhere. Like
I can agree with that.
I kind of pictured it.
I was thinking that too while I was listening to it. I was like, you know what? This sounds kind of all over the place, and it jumps so much. Like not in terms of style necessarily, but just the whole thing jumps around.
It was like
from riff idea to
Yeah.
riff idea. It's almost like listening to old school Metallica, where they did a lot of that, where they'd be like, let's take a riff idea that we like, let's put it next to another riff idea that we like, and they just kept building these like really progressive thrash metal songs until they just became this like 9-minute like craziness where you're just completely thrown from one end of the song to the other. And I definitely get those elements here. So Dream Theater, I guess, would probably be, I could see that, but I also see the more like thrashy elements to it.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And I mean, to clarify, like, I am a Dream Theater fan, but most of my love of Dream Theater comes from, what the heck is the album called? Because Scenes from a Memory is a song, and then they did an entire album as a sequel to that. So it might have actually been Scenes Part 2. That's where, like, most of my love of Dream Theater is. I've heard a lot of their other stuff, and it is great, but, like, that's what I really enjoyed from them. So and anytime I hear anything that reminds me of that, it's immediately where my mind goes.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like Dream Theater, it's specifically like Justin's version of Dream Theater, which is a specific album.
Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, this is great. So there's a story mode in the game. There's also an arcade mode in the game. I'm not sure which one I'm playing through. I believe it's story mode. I don't think I even saw an arcade mode and was like, "Ooh, I'll do that one," because I'm moving around in the world map, and I don't think there's probably. I'm assuming that there's no world map in the arcade mode, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Perhaps you unlock one mode when you finish the other.
Oh yeah, possibly. Yeah, that might be. I wonder how this plays in multiplayer. We'll have to try it out sometime.
I was going to say, like, I'd be down for doing the couch co-op. I'm a little bummed that it's not online multiplayer, because then I'd grab it and be like, all right, we're going to play online this weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely get together and do like a video game day. We'll play your Golden Axe cabinet. We'll do some of this.
Slayin 2. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, so let's move into my next pick here. We're going to go from hordes faced in the lagoon to showdown with a giant dragon.
Ooh, sounds fun.
Let's give it a battle. I mean, listen.
Listen battle. Oh my God!
Welcome back. You have just returned in one piece, surprisingly, from
Oh
the
my
showdown
goodness.
with a giant dragon.
Oh Lord! Wow, that was amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
so I will admit, your first 3 tracks, I listened to very little.
Fair.
I listened to the first 3 because I didn't want to spoil it for myself.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't recognize the first like couple notes, and I mostly picked like what I was familiar with.
Yeah.
Because I loved it. But this was, oh man, I was like smiling from ear to ear.
I looked at you towards the end, and I thought you were laughing. I was going to call you out. I was like, what made you laugh?
Because it was, okay, so...
Well, I don't even know if you were laughing.
There were just so many layers to this. Like, first off, the insane beats per minute on this. Like, I don't know what you were, like, if you were like, all right, so this song, we're going to do 4,000 beats per minute. Everyone's going to have a heart attack when they hear it, and everyone's going to die. It's going to be amazing. But no, like, it starts off very chill, like, for the most part, like, very orchestral or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then as it's going with those like, main melodies or with the crazy chuggy guitar and just thrashy chugginess, then it goes up a layer. The one thing I will say that I love about Matt's music is in almost every soundtrack that I've ever heard, he always has at least one song where he's like, okay, we're going to build and build and build and build. There's often in VGM, there's, you know, peaks and valleys. You know, there's rising action, falling action. Matt's action is always rising. It's always going up a notch, up a notch, up a notch. And even when he's falling, like even when he's dropping out, you know, towards the end of the song, it loops back into the beginning typically. So you're just on this roller coaster wave of constant, it's like never getting dropped on a roller coaster. You're just constantly going up. But man, I started laughing because it got to a point, and I don't know, maybe it was like towards the middle of the song, there was a part where like there's a lot of orchestral stuff happening in the background, like you got that call and answer orchestral bit.
Yes.
I loved that, where it's like with the guitar doing like a call and answer with the orchestral parts, all while, you know, the still craziness is going on in the background with the drums. The part right after that where it's like da 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 with the drums, that's what made me go ha ha ha. It's like
nice.
I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your butt, Matt. I'm sorry. Like, people need to hear the soundtrack, and I said that to you, if you recall, when he sent it to me.
Yeah.
He was like, oh, you got to listen to this. This is like one of the best things I've ever done. And I'm like, yo, straight up, this is amazing. And you remember, when I heard it, I was like, dude, you got to get Slayin 2. First off, just buy the game because it's a lot of fun. But second off, you have to hear this soundtrack. It's so good. We got to get Matt on to do an episode for this. And we were like, yeah. And then like every time we were like, it's
Life
just
has been crazy in the last 2 years. Yeah.
For sure. And it kept getting pushed back and further and further and further. And
But now we're here.
And it's so good to be here because it's just, that was so good.
You know, I like that you called out the call and response thing, because that's something that I wrote down too. And it's throughout. Like, I feel like there's always something going on with call and response. Even in the slower part, you've got it. I mean, it's much simpler, but it's still just like the ba. And I mean, you don't really always catch that as call and response, but the persistence of that motif, like not motif, but the persistence of that technique in other ways, like you said with the guitars and stuff, like it all just feels like call and response, which is really cool because you just have the song basically having a conversation.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. And then I didn't notice the organ at first because it was so blindingly fast. I was just like, what is that? And then I was like, oh, that's an organ.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Like, there's been plenty of songs that I've heard with like fast organ. Usually it's, you know, a lot of rock stuff, but it's just not something that I expected to hear in this context. And then once I realized that it was just like a rock organ or whatever type of organ it was, like, oh man, that is wild.
What was the inspiration on this one? I assume this is like a final battle or boss.
Like
It's a late level in the game where it's actually, there's not enemies in it. It's just you go right in. It's just this fight with the big dragon. It's the only level like that, I think, in the entire game.
Okay.
I mean, it was a pretty late addition to the game. Like, it was something that was added very late in the game, and I'd already I felt like I'd already used all my tools in my toolkit, because this is 39 tracks or whatever. It's like a lot of tracks on a game, or 36 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of had to make it sound like you're fighting a giant dragon, and then you know, we dive back in again. And so, you know, I'd used the organ sound in the graveyard level, and I thought I really liked the way it sounded with the guitars, and so I was like, all right, you know, let's try and make this sound distinct as well. Throw it in, why not? You guys, you did mention the call and response thing, and I don't think I was doing it intentionally, but I really did feel like the entire soundtrack I was trying to sound like Yngwie Malmsteen playing with an orchestra behind him or something. So it's like, all right, he's gonna play a bit, and then the orchestra's gonna help him out, and then so yeah, it's like it's just a natural thing that sort of happens, especially if you're not thinking about things in terms of chord progressions, more like melodies and melodies. So it's like, you don't want to just have one melody just going nonstop, and you kind of have to like go back and forth.
Sure.
But the funny thing with this track was, I think of all the songs in the entire game, this was the only time where I said, all right, to hell with it. We're just going to add everything all at once at the very end of the song. And so that's why I was like, man, if you look at the compressor's like barely holding on, because everything's like, go, go, go.
Yeah.
Like, all right, throw the organ in with the guitars and the orchestra and the drums, and let's see if it all, and the bass. And let's see if it works. And it's like, it's not working. Like, it's breaking apart almost. And I also have in the background, like, it's a technique I learned from electronic music, actually. It's like, hey, if you want to transition between one section to the next one, just have a rising sound. Sometimes it's just white noise, like,
yes,
boom, and then you hit. And so it's like, I have that going in the background too. So it's like, it almost is pure noise just at that end. And it's doing those fast, just like, and it's just, anyways, that was the one time in the soundtrack where I'm like, all right, let's just go for it. Everything all at once.
That's awesome.
It definitely feels like a wall of sound, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that kind of effect.
Agreed. Next up is my pick. Tested in the Southern Grasslands.
Back to the Grasslands with you.
I love these Grassland tracks, and I think you will too. So let's give it a listen. Welcome back to XVGM Radio's Slayin 2 episode with Slayin 2's composer, Matt Creamer. That track that we just heard was Tested in the Southern Grasslands, and all I have to say to you, Justin, is bow, 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 bow,
100%.
FM bass all the way. This was one of the first songs that I heard off of the soundtrack and was just like, whoa. Yo, he's throwing in some FM bass with the Mega Man X guitar lines. Like, whoa, what is happening here?
Yeah. When we started listening to it, you were like, yo, listen to the bass. And I was like, okay.
That was the first thing. I was like, yo, bass.
And yeah, no, I wasn't sure if that was an FM bass at first, but the more it went on, I was just like, yeah, no, the quality on that. I mean, for one, the quality is really good. I mean, I hear FM bass, and Now I am much more into a lot of it, but like if you had said, yo, FM bass like a year or two ago, I'd have been like, oh man, it's gonna be twarmpy. But
Yeah.
But no, it was anything but, and it very thick quality, and I liked, I don't know if there was a filter on it or what, but there was something on the end of every bass note that was just like chef's kiss. Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just those crazy guitars. There's a part where, you know, after that fatty boom batty bass line, there's this part with the guitar where it's just kind of going all over the place, very like progressive style, like like all over the neck of the guitar. And to hear that plus that bass line, it all really merges well together. I mean, I feel like we're just kind of repeating ourselves in a lot of ways. So maybe we should just shut up and let Matt talk. So Matt, what was your goal here with this track?
That's funny. The developer, I can distinctly remember, wanted this one to be a slower track because this, I think, if I recall, this is the Grassland where it's like it's kind of sunset in the background, so it's kind of almost nighttime, but not all the way. And
I think so, yeah.
He really wanted it to have some more. I don't remember his exact terminology, but I remember what I was trying to do with this one musically, other than slow it down. To me, this song reminds me of Transformers soundtrack. You know, when Unicron is floating by, it's like
Yeah.
And so I was trying to do the exact same thing with my like it was a very similar thing I was trying to go for. And then just hearing it back, it's funny, I can always hear, I don't know if you guys have ever written a song, but if anyone listening to this has ever written a song, sometimes you'll hear a note in your head, or you're presented with a note, and then you just know how to finish it because you can draw from other songs you've heard, and you just like, oh, it has to resolve itself like this. Well, one of the things I can hear in that is the Italy level from Double Dragon 3. I just know for a fact, like in my head, I'm like, it has to sound like that thing from Italy level, Double Dragon 3. I can't even hum it for you, but as soon as I hear it, and that's like, I know I just got pulled in that direction.
Okay.
That's just what it ended up being. And the other thing, I wanted to do the Meshuggah thing where they always have the rhythm section will hit on the kick drum. Like it's always like boom, boom, what do they know? So the kick drum's always hitting at the exact same time that the bass is.
Right.
Musically, that's all I was going for with that track.
Okay.
It is also one of the only tracks on the soundtrack where I actually use an actual synth bass, like not just an FM bass. I layered an FM bass in with it, but and it's one of the only tracks on the soundtrack where I'm like, all right, let's try some synth bass. And it's funny, I get myself all worked up when I'm making music where I'm like, hey man, if I add synth bass, they probably won't like it, probably won't go along with it.
Right.
And it's like I get all up in my own head like, oh, they're not gonna like it, and then it ends up just sounding good in the soundtrack.
Absolutely did, yes.
This sound for the bass specifically sounds so unique to the rest of the soundtrack. It really stands out.
It's very pronounced. Like I said, there's that quality at the end that kind of sustains at the end of the bass note that I haven't really heard in any of the other bass in this soundtrack. And I mean, even if I don't hear it again, I mean, I'll be partly sad, but at the same time, like that is a really cool song. And also, like, I know what song I want to go back to pretty frequently.
There's other elements in the town that I forgot to talk about, like you can repair certain buildings that have been destroyed by some of the monsters. And if you do that, then you'll be able to get different things. Like there's different characters that provide different things to help you out. There's like shops and all different type of stuff that you can unlock. One of the things that you can access is if you've ever played Shovel Knight.
Yes.
Jake Kaufman has like a little minstrel character in there.
Oh, yeah.
That like will play the music if you find the music.
The sheets, yeah.
Right. And in Slayin 2, there's also like a Matt Kramer kind of little character that is like the minstrel sort of thing, and you can get music and play that too.
Oh, that's so really cool.
Very similar.
I like that feature in a game to basically build the sound test into the fabric of the game itself,
right,
and make it part of the game. So,
all right, what's next?
Yeah, next up we're gonna go from Southern Grasslands to Graveyards, Curses, and the Undead. Ooh. That is the name of the track. A little spooky. We're a little bit past Spooktober here, but I'm always in the mood.
Yeah.
So let's. Nice.
Give it a listen.
Yeah, let's listen to Graveyards, Curses, and the Undead from Slayin 2 by Matt Kramer. right, rise from your graves. That was Graveyards, Curses, and the Undead from the 2020 masterpiece that is Slayin 2 by Matt Creamer. And, oh boy.
Oh man.
Oh man, oh boy. So this one I picked because it is not exactly like them, but it really kind of reminded me of... There was a period of time where I listened to, it's not really a style of music, it's more of a style of performance, but I associate it with a style of music called Visual K. It comes out of like the J-pop, like gothic, it's kind of like gothic J-pop.
Yeah.
J-rock, J-pop, they do up a whole lot of makeup and they put on a big performance with their music. And like Malice Miser is the one that comes to mind. They're a kind of like a gothic rock, art rock outfit. I'm not sure if they're even still around, but it's what came to mind when I heard this and was like, oh, I haven't heard some of that stuff in a while, so this is really cool. Are either of you familiar with any of that stuff?
I've heard of them, but I actually heard Cradle of Filth.
Okay.
I heard a lot of inspiration from a lot of their more like symphonic kind of gothic elements that could easily be paired up with your thing. So maybe it's a combination of both, possibly.
I've definitely heard some Cradle of Filth that has that similar sound.
Yeah.
They're not my go-to, so I wouldn't have thought of them. But as soon as you mentioned them, I was like, oh, yeah.
The beginning almost has like a Wednesday 13 kind of vibe because it has like that spooky kind of woo, bit. But after that beginning, the first couple of spooky notes, it kicks off into this whole different thing that Matt's doing here. And so I see your aspects of it, but for whatever reason, when I was listening to it, it popped up in my head. I was like, oh man, this sounds like, especially like the transitions between like the more gothic imagery and the metal, like more like metal type stuff. That's really what hit it for me. Like I can picture like a choir kind of coming in or like a female vocalist kind of coming in, during those like more organ solos kind of. Yeah. What are your thoughts on our assumptions, Matt?
It's really fascinating to hear you guys explain it. And it's like when I'm writing it, I don't actually visualize or form these thoughts in my head, but you guys are basically forming it for me. Like that's basically exactly what I was trying to do, even though I had no idea why I was doing it or what. Like the graveyard visuals looked very spooky to me. And I was like, all right, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get that organ in here, that like church organ. And I'm going to just... Once I heard the church organ, it's like everything fell into place after that. It's like, all right, can I slot that church organ into my protocol that I've been working on the whole soundtrack? It's like, I can. If I play my guitar and the church organ together, it sounds perfectly good together. So it's like, all right, there's your track. Like, so then you start thinking like, all right, what would Malmsteen do here? All right, a little harmonic minor here. And then it just becomes like, if I was trying to sound a little like Castlevania with this protocol, what would it sound like? And then, like you said, it sounds like Visual K, which I forgot was even a thing until you mentioned it. It's like, that's exactly what it sounds like. That's exactly what it sounds like. And then, Little Cradle Fifth. I did manage to, I don't know if you guys heard, but right before the lightning bolt or the thundercrack, I did manage to scoot in just a little hint of a blast beat. And I always love doing that because I feel like developers and producers would be like, get that out of here. You can't have that in a video game. No one wants to play a game with blast beats. It's like, but I keep trying to toss it in just for like a quarter of a bar, just like a little bit of blast beat. Can I have that? And they never, as long as it's in a sort of crescendo, they never seem to call me on it. It's like, okay, but if I came in hard and heavy, like blast beat right from the start, they'd be like, this song seems a little fast. But,
we need to create a game.
So I did manage to just tap into a little black metal there for just a split second.
Nice.
One little thing before I forget, mentioning that thundercrack, this was actually a really cool thing between the developer and I. I saw in the level, in the background, because the game basically has like fighting game backgrounds. You're basically doing like same screen, like you said, like ease, but it's like he pictured it like fighting game backgrounds because they have some of the best pixel art of the eras, like all the animations in the background of a fighting game. I noticed in the background of his level he had thunderclaps going on and the whole sky would light up. And so I was like, is it possible if we can make sure a thunderclap always happens at that part in the song when I add the thunderclap? And so he's like, all right, give me the time index exactly when it happens. And so we've hard coded into the game now. Every time that thunderclap happens, there's a thunderclap in the background, and it looks so good when you know to look for it.
Awesome. Oh man,
that's badass. Yeah, that's great.
That is fantastic. So before we get to my next pick, we have a little surprise for everybody. We're gonna do our very first intermission.
Oh yes.
And this is gonna be like a way to shake off this soundtrack because from the beginning of the soundtrack until where we're at right now, it's been balls to the wall.
It has.
Like you've been punched in the face and groin repeatedly, multiple times. So now it's time for us to just kind of shake things off a little bit. So we're going to play a track from the soundtrack called Goblin Builders Guild. It's 12 seconds long, and it's the mightiest, chillest, 12 seconds the funkiest. I don't know. It's so out there for the rest of the soundtrack, but it's so good. I was like, where can I fit this in? So we're going to play Goblin Builders Guild for our intermission. So nice. Sit back, relax, grab yourself a drink, but be quick because it's only 12 seconds long. Welcome back. That was our intermission, our very first intermission that we've ever done. Goblin Builders Guild was the name of the song. It was 12 seconds long. I love that whip crack right at the end. Yeah.
I like the way that it speeds up. Like, it speeds up slowly. It's kind of like an exponential thing. Like, you can tell it's speeding up slowly, and then as it gets towards the end of the 12 seconds, it starts speeding up more and more and more until it gets to that whip crack.
I can explain why.
I like that.
I can explain.
There doesn't need to be an explanation. It's just great.
Oh, there's an explanation, Justin. So in the game, I already talked a little bit about, like, if you pay the goblins, they will repair certain buildings that will get you like new abilities, like the ability to buy new abilities or to save certain people's homes or whatever, stuff like that. So you pay the goblins, they show up at the houses, and then and they're literally like rebuilding the building. So it's going faster and faster because they're speeding up, finishing up the job. I love that like Killer Instinct hammer that they threw in, the KI Gold hammer from the title music, the dun-dun-dun-tung. So Matt kind of threw that in here with every, obviously, to represent the building of these buildings.
Yeah.
But the whip crack at the end is just so solid. I really wish like every song had a whip crack at the end. It's like, get back to work. Anyways, what were you thinking on that one?
Home Improvement intro theme song.
Oh my God.
Nice.
That is fantastic.
I was just gonna say, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And the whip crack at the end, I was trying to find a sound effect for high fives, couldn't do it, and so I just gave up. I said, all right, I just need like a whip sound. I don't even know what I used, but the goblins, they build your thing and they're all tumbling around, there's like smoke everywhere, and then it settles, and then they high five each other, and that's just the high five of it. And Justin, you're right, it does speed up, and it doesn't speed up on like a smooth gradient. I actually just, towards the end of the song, I'm like, all right, I got 4 bars left. So I split it into chunks, like, okay, speed it up a bit on this one, then speed it up a bit more. Then at the very end, speed it up one last little bit. But that was the developer. He really wanted it to speed up as it was going. So it's like, all right, let's do it.
Wow.
Nice. I love it. It makes for what I consider a little bit of musical comedy. And I love,
for sure.
I love musical comedy because it's not something that I see a whole lot. Like, there's comedy music, like Flight of the Conchords, Tenacious D, and stuff like that. But when you can make me laugh just by the things that you do with the music, without using words, whether you meant to or not, it always sticks with me.
I have one complaint now. Now that I've heard what it's based on, I'm a little disappointed that instead of the high five whip sound, it's just the Tim Allen grunt.
Of course.
That would have been amazing if you sampled that and like pitched it, like changed it up a little bit so like it had a similar kind of snap to a high five, but it was just like 7 or 8 Tim Allens just like layered on top of each other, like all maybe even like delayed, like slightly delayed, so it was like you snorted.
It's in the director's cut, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that Home Improvement theme song. That really gets me going. That's an invigorating track. Anytime I do anything around the house that's handy, anything at all, I run down to my office and literally blare that song as loud as I can. As loud as I can.
That's amazing.
It's not just a one-off. That song, it's permeating. Of course
great.
I'll do the Home Improvement theme song. What else would I even do here?
Right.
Yeah. No, 100% fair.
So we hope you all enjoyed our very first intermission on the show. 96 episodes in. Let's move on to our next pick.
All right, what you got?
I have a track that I'm going to be honest with you. It's back to the Grasslands.
More Grasslands. All
More
right,
Grasslands. Monsters spotted in the Grasslands this time. Again, from Slayin 2, from our good pal, Matt Creamer. Welcome back. That was Monsters Spotted in the Grasslands. And that was by, I don't know if you know this, but our guest of honor, Matt Kramer.
Oh, yeah.
Spoilers.
That guy.
Norrin Radd. Oh, man. This is a shreddy little number.
Oh, yeah. The opening is just like... The opening tells you exactly what you're in for. That slide and squeal down the guitar.
Yeah.
And then just... If you aren't ready for your face to be melted off, then you're deaf.
What are you doing here?
I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Stop it. Get some help.
How are you listening to this podcast if you're deaf?
Right. It's one of the first levels that I remember going back to, this one for sure. It's a pretty by-the-books track and level as far as this goes. I mean, what else can I say about how awesome this soundtrack is? I'm trying to pinpoint specifically things to talk about for this track, and the one thing that stood out to me was the return to that more FM-tinged bass.
Yeah.
But it wasn't quite as, like, slappy and, like, chunky as, like, the bow, bow, bow. Right. It wasn't that. It was much more like
it was a lot more active.
Yeah, almost like a Steve Harris speedy number. So, what were you going for with this particular track?
Yeah, like I said, this is one of the first levels. I don't know if all games are like this, but we basically wrote the soundtrack for this game in order of, like, the first track was the first level, and it, like, basically all the way to the end of the game. Track 33 on the soundtrack is the original pitch, and that's where I'm like, what if I use this guitar sound and these drums and this and blah blah blah, like, would that work? And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. So this was the literal first track I'd written with that protocol that I'd come up with in the original pitch for the game. So it's still a little raw. This is probably the rawest track in the game because it's all FM bass on this one. I hadn't figured out how to slot in or start using real bass, and I'm using a synth sound here that's a sample of an actual synthesizer. So it's kind of something you'd hear on the PlayStation.
Okay.
Where it's, they're not using a VST or an actual software synthesizer or a hardware synthesizer. They're using a sample of one note on a synthesizer.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay. I was wondering what that, because there's that note in the background that's more like, it's just like, it feels like it's continuous.
Yeah.
Because I was paying so much attention to the melody, but in the back of my head, I was like, wait a minute, what is that in the background?
One of the things that I was just thinking of, you were talking about, it was an FM bass. As you were saying that, I was like, you know what the bass actually reminded me of? It's not FM bass at all, but it reminded me of the bass from Gradius 3 on the SNES.
Oh, okay.
The do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah.
And like...
Konami.
Yeah. And I love the tonal quality on, like, I love that soundtrack. And a lot of the reason I love that soundtrack is because the bass throughout it is very nice.
Yeah.
So that it just reminded me, like, that's kind of what this bass sounded like to me.
So is it an FM bass or is it more?
Yeah.
It is.
This one's straight up FM bass, but it's not a Sega Genesis FM bass. This one I remember very vividly using an actual DX7 software emulation of it. So DX7 is basically like Sega Genesis. Their FM could only be 4 operators detailed, and that doesn't need to make too much sense to you guys, but it was based on the actual DX7 synthesizer that was used in, like, Top Gun's Highway to the Danger Zone, really classic. That's like the DX7 in a nutshell is 6 op, so it can be 2 operators more detailed than the Genesis. So I was using a more detailed FM bass for this one, actually off of a pack that Keyboard Player for Toto released, like this DX7. Literally, you could plug in, like, cartridges to it, and that's how you would get presets. Like, people would sell these commercial cartridges that had presets on it. You plug it into your DX7, and then you could write all your stuff that way, because it was hell to make your own patches on the DX7. Like, only lunatics could do it. So that's why these cartridges, they were very, very handy.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Genesis stuff was straight up just used off those cartridges too. So there's a lot of familiar sounds. I can't remember exactly what this sound was called, but it was off the cartridge pack that the Toto Keyboard Player released back in the day.
That's crazy.
Awesome, yeah.
One other little tidbit too. The actual pick slide on this is the only bit of live guitaring I did on the entire soundtrack.
I was wondering how you were able to duplicate that on, like, a more like
I just assumed
digital
that
setup.
That was real. Like,
yeah,
I can't imagine how you would do that. How you would fake that.
You just throw your cat on the keyboard and do a butt scoot.
Oh, jeez.
So it's like.
Then you throw your keyboard out the window because that's gross.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just wipe it down afterwards,
Never clean. Forever unclean.
Forever unclean.
All right. Let's move on to my next track. We only have a few left, but we're going to make them worth it. We're going to make it last. This is going to be the long-forgotten Ancient Library. The name alone evokes many a Metroidvania to me, or a Gigavania, I'm sorry. So let's give it a listen. Welcome back to our Slayin 2 with Matt Creamer Focus special guest episode, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
And
things
stuff.
and cheese and
things
stuff.
and cheese and pickles. That was long forgotten ancient library. As I said, the name alone evokes, Castlevania, Time Spinner. The song definitely does not fall into those, which I'm kind of glad because
The beginning does.
Well, the beginning a little bit. The beginning actually reminds me of a specific song. There's a band called Switchblade Symphony. There's a song called they have a song called Gutter Glitter, and it's not exact in any way, shape, or form. But the opening to this really kind of evokes that song in me, and then it kicks into this wicked fast synth playscape. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it just takes off, and I'm glad that it stands apart from the track name made me think of, because obviously I have not played this, so I'm not sure what goes on at this point, but
I haven't gotten to this part.
It sounds really cool, and I love the thickness of the synth that kind of just comes in, and it's just, like I said, it's off like a shot.
He threw in that sweeping white noise, techno white noise thing to the whoosh thing.
It's all over the soundtrack.
Which I totally caught it this time. But what I was going to say is, you mentioned Time Spinner.
Yeah.
And I totally picked up on that in that beginning, to the point where my very first question to you, Matt, about this one is, did you actually use any kind of PlayStation era synths? Because when we spoke with Jeff Ball, the composer on Time Spinner, he went into great lengths about the process that he had to go through to make that soundtrack, to the point where he was staring at pictures of Mishiro Yamane's setup that were from Japanese magazines or whatever.
Wow.
And you remember this conversation that we had with him?
Ago.
It was 4 years ago. And that's how he found out about it. He basically took that, looked it up, looked up all the modules and all the information about it, and used that so that he could piece together the PlayStation 1 sound. Now, I don't think you did that, but I'm curious as to how you got that tone so similar. It's not exact, but it feels more of an inspired by than an actual, like, completely ripped tone. So
Right.
how did you get that?
God dang, you guys have good questions. That's actually such a spot on question. It's ridiculous. So congratulations to you guys. Because that you pick up on it. I don't know. You guys actually do listen to the music. You're not just phoning it in like you have intelligent questions. So yes. And by the way, I've done the exact same thing as what'd you say? The
Jeff
football
Ball.
name.
Yeah.
Jeff. I did the exact same thing where you look at all those old pictures. You'd be like, well, what the hell were they doing? Because Iku Mizutani, apparently, I just read recently, Shatterhand composer, for those that don't know, he wrote his own engine that could take MIDI notes from his actual modules and convert it to NES music, and that's how he was writing his NES music. So it's like, God damn, what modules was he using? And so what you would do is you'd look up pictures of him. Who was he using? That one? Was he using the Roland frickin' this or whatever thing he's using? So yeah, it's the exact same process. So for that synth sound, like I said, with that PlayStation, I used like a sample of a synth that would fit with like the PlayStation thing. And I wanted to know what synthesizer it was that it was originally sampled from in the exact same way, and I couldn't find it. So I actually went onto like a Reddit forum, like a Reddit synthesizer guru forum, like for synth heads and maniacs and stuff. And I actually posted the sound. I'm like, what synthesizer do you think they made this sample from? And no one could answer me, even though I thought like this should be super easy for you guys.
Yeah.
So I had to basically go through all of my synths, because I have a lot of emulated synths, and some of them are really accurate, and try and find any, like, go through presets and presets till I'm like, does that sound like what I'm looking for? Because believe it or not, that synth sound, it's like on that particular synth, I believe it's like the Oberheim SEM V or something. It's Arturia does a really good emulation of it. What they have is basically two oscillators that play at the same time. So an oscillator, for all intents and purposes, like a square wave on your NES. And so they can have two going at once. And a big thing with synthesizers was that you would detune one just a bit, and so they play at the same time, but one was just a little detuned, and then suddenly you get a really lush chorus sort of sound. And so what's going on with that sound in the PlayStation was they're basically out of tune for a split second, and then they're in tune. So it's like you get this little bit of a pluck at the start of out of tune, and then it goes right into tune. And so once I found out the SEM was what was doing that, or like there's presets at least on that synthesizer that sounded like what I was looking for, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to use that to write some leads now on this song. So I'm not using the samples I was using anymore, because I don't think those samples could have held up to that sort of, it was supposed to be, long forgotten ancient library, and I don't just want some beep, 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 like PlayStation synth sound. Like, it has to sound a little more grandiose, so I needed it to be lush sounding. That's where the pursuit, I had to go and find, like, can I want to have it stand on its own, because in this song the guitar takes a little bit of a backseat, and the synths are basically playing a lot of the main riffs for the track. The other reason for that, if you guys haven't been to the level, it's like kind of a hidden level. I don't think it's part of the canon, like, progress of the game. It's like an offshoot level, but it's Pixel Licker definitely has like Japanese anime influences. Like, he loves anime. We talked about anime all the time when we were prototyping the game, and so anime would always do that thing different than the West. West would do like D&D. You're just like there's lanterns and there's this and that, but there's never any robots that just come into your medieval world. But Japan was always like, and then there's robots for some reason. In Japan, or in medieval times and wizards and stuff. And so this was an example of where it's like there's a robot, or like a long forgotten ancient library, but there's robots in it, kind of like Castle in the Sky, Laputa, like similar stuff. So
or
there's
even
like
Chrono
robots
Trigger.
inside this.
Like Gato.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I was like, it's got to be heavy synth on this one, because there literally is just a giant robot in that level that looks like the robot character you can unlock, but it's like an evil one or something. I can't really remember. So
that's cool.
So I was like, synths. Let's go with synths on this one. Let's do it.
Absolutely. That's so cool.
There's so many hidden things in this game that you can, depending on how you go about defeating the enemies, you can unlock a specific amount of treasure chests. And the treasure chests have keys and different like spells and things that you can get, invulnerability, speed, all that sort of different things. But then there's also the musical selections that you can get, that you could play from Norrin, the street composer, right, in the town there.
I'm from the streets, man.
From the streets. And then there's some other stuff that you can get too, like there's secrets. So at the end of each level, It'll tell you like how many secrets you unlocked or whatever. And again, the object of the game is repetition, playing through levels multiple times to try to unlock it. I haven't figured out how to unlock like everything in each level. Like there's some levels that I have unlocked everything, but there's so much going on in this game at the same time. Plus with the music going crazy, like it's hard to pick up on when you got something you didn't get before.
Gotcha.
So playing through the levels multiple times, it at some point in time it'll like trigger like, oh, okay, I just picked up the little musical note thing, so that means that I'll get a musical soundtrack thing.
Nice.
So it'll tell you at the end of each level.
Okay.
It's just something I thought I'd add. Speaking of hidden things.
Yeah.
But you should definitely talk to Jeff Ball because he got the hookup. I don't know what he did, but if you listen to Time Spinner's soundtrack, it's straight, like, to the point where Justin was, I remember you picked that one song off that soundtrack that we played for him, and we were like, yo, this is Symphony of the Night. Like, this is straight up Chapel or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, my pick.
Yeah, your last track.
My last track already? Oh, man. Okay, well, Charging the Volcano is my next pick and my last pick.
Make sure you
Sad
charge
to
it
say.
all the way up.
Charge that. You better charge that volcano.
This is such a Mike pick, by the way.
Oh, for sure. 100% this is a Mike pick. So enjoy. Get your faces melted. Welcome back. That is my final pick. Whoo boy, Charging the Volcano. So good. By Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. Really channeling your Iron Maiden with this track, especially the drums. That's like straight up Nico McBrain drumming. I assume that was your goal. You were like, I'm gonna write a song for Mike. Is what he did.
Aw.
Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But I doubt it.
You're 100% correct, as it turns out.
Yes. I knew it. I knew he wrote a song just for me. What do you think about this one, Justin?
Oh man, I mean, he was saying like as we went in, he was like, "This is such a Mike pick." I was like, "Oh, I'm getting ready," and I was mostly prepared, but yeah, no, that was absolutely a Mike pick. There's no surprises there.
Yeah,
my face was melted off with a cheese grater. That's what it feels like.
I don't know what it is about that beat. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I love Iron Maiden so much, but just like the. Like ending on such like a like that final hit is so enunciated, and I think that's what really draws me in, maybe as a drummer, but also as a Maiden fan. So no clue.
But, I can see that.
Yeah,
it was balls to the wall from start to finish.
For sure. All about Charging the Volcano. So what about this one? In all seriousness.
Well, I know we were just channeled the same thing there. You know, it's common between all metalheads. You just, you know, when you dip into that, you know what you're dealing with. And it's just riffs. Get the riffs going here. I can't remember specifically what I was doing with this one. I know he wanted it to be hard. He wanted it to be fast. And so it's like, if you give me the green light to go fast, it's like, all right, let's go goddamn fast.
Watch out.
I'm not messing around.
Yeah.
But I've learned enough that I can't go as fast as I want. The final boss theme in this game, I did get to go basically as ridiculous as I wanted. Interrupting the sacrifice, that's the one where I'm like, okay, it's the final boss track. Come on, you let me go as hard as I want, right?
Yeah.
But this one, you know, I wanted to keep it like within reason. Like, here's just a fast, zippy track. But I do think with this track, it was kind of like reliving. This is what the track I always wanted to write when I was 15 years old. And I finally got to write this track for a reason. And, you know, as I got older, I was always like the fastest guitar player of my friends. And so whenever I would jam with my friends, they couldn't play the stuff I wanted to play. And so we just always had to kind of water it down or play something I didn't really want to play. I always wanted to do fast pomming. They're like, like I want to go as fast as humanly possible.
Right.
And no one could really do that and keep up with me. So I didn't jam with a lot of people as a result. And then there was some point around when I turned 20, I had like this thing called the Pod XT, and it was for recording your guitar into the computer, and it had like amp simulators in it. And I updated the firmware on it at one point, and it just flashed all of the presets that I'd written myself. And I had to redo them from scratch, and they changed a lot of the amps, so I couldn't even remake them. So that hit me so hard, I basically retired from guitar, hung up the guitar, and that's when I started just doing chiptunes as my main type of music, because I'm like, I don't like the way these tones sound so much that I won't even play the guitar anymore. I'll just write chiptunes because I have the ideas in my head that have to get out one way or the other. And so it went for like 6 years, from 2005 to 2011. It was all chiptunes.
Yeah.
And so I'd not played guitar for many, many years. And so with this soundtrack, when I found out I could actually create guitar riffs on the keyboard and have them sound exactly like what I wished I could be playing on guitar, it was like, this is exactly what I've always wanted to write. This song right here was like, that was me as 15 years old, incarnate, that track.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I really like the repetition on the main melody theme that happens in there. It's a good lick, and I'm glad we got to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man. Well, I guess we're at the end. We got your final pick, and then that's it. And I'm a little bummed because I wish you picked more songs, but then the episode would be really, really, really long.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So,
and it is late, and I'm already getting loopy. So
Yeah.
if we'd picked more songs, I would be incoherent.
we could just talk about Home Improvement some more. But
the rest of the
The Home
episode was
Improvement
just-
stream when? Let's do it, boys.
yes. All right, let's move into your final pick.
Okay, my final pick is The Best Performance of Your Life,
Aw.
and that's the name of the track.
Oh.
Welcome back. That was The Best Performance of Your Life.
Refreshing.
Very refreshing.
Like a fresca.
Like a fresca.
Like a medieval fresca in the night.
Absolutely. Great song. I'm guessing this is probably like the closing credits or something.
That's what I was thinking.
Feels kind of like a closing credits. It feels very anime to me.
Oh, I could see that.
That's an inconsequential thing to say, really, because anime music is like runs the gamut, so it's all over the place. But like
Needs more Japanese vocals.
yeah.
Female Japanese vocals.
I was gonna say like it feels kind of like a DBZ ending theme.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, that fits a lot more, especially with the anime influences.
No, this was very whimsical. It was very upbeat. I really enjoyed the thick bass that was in there. There's a lot of stuff going on. So again, it's one of those things like it's not necessarily subtle, but because of the layers that we have going on here, it's not really that pronounced. But I hear it. I appreciate it. I hope you feel seen.
I heard a lot of movie soundtrack in this, and a lot of Jake Kaufman in this for some odd reason. Like the ending to Double Dragon Neon comes to mind, even though that's a lot more silly and slapsticky, but it has the essence of you did it. You beat the game, you know? And I feel like you really channeled that aspect of Jake's work a little bit when it comes to end themes or end credits or that sort of thing. Like, you know, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek in a way.
Yeah.
Was that kind of what you were going for?
Oh yeah, there's genres to video game music, especially all of us growing up playing like 8-bit, 16-bit, even 32-bit. You know, you just know what an ending should sound like to a game, and it should have like, even I as a I write very melancholic, bombastic, weird sort of stuff, but even I know an ending theme song or like credits should have like a nice resolution to it, and so it's really easy to just tap into that when you know it's the end credits. And yeah, you guys are right. I named the track "The Best Performance of Your Life" because the developer, he likes to add just a nice little detail to his game. So at the end of this game, if you get the good ending, you save the king, everyone in the town, you've built up the town so everyone's houses are built again. Yeah. There's like a big concert that's held at the end of the game, and you basically walk while the credits are going all the way to this big stage at the end, and it's like all medieval, so it's built out of wood and stuff. But they pull the curtains back, and like all the characters from the game are on the stage, and they're playing music for the crowd of all the people in the town. Oh, that's awesome. So this is basically like the song that they're playing for all the people. And I don't know why, but I was like, all right, it should sound kind of like Sum 41. Like I was just trying to to write with that in mind, you know, like the similar sort of late 90s or early 2000s sort of guitar tendencies. That's kind of what I was going for anyways.
That's a very Japanese game take in terms of not the soundtrack, but the idea of characters in the game playing with musical instruments. I mean, they did it in some of the promo art for Rondo of Blood, Castlevania. They really? Yeah, they had Richter holding a guitar, and I think Maria was holding a microphone, if I recall. Yeah. Nice. And then they also, if you've ever played Battlemania Daiginjo, which is Troubleshooter 2, in the options, if you go into the options, there's a sound test, like a music test, and there's chibi versions of the characters, and they're all playing like the instruments of the different like Genesis, you know, hardware layers. So you'll have one character playing drums, one character playing something else, you know, one character. So I don't know why, but like Japanese developers specifically do a lot of that. So that's really cool that he kind of took inspiration from that and kind of merged it in with the soundtrack, sort of. Yeah. I
also think it's funny how 2 times in as many days I have had a reference to Sum 41 in video game music, and I don't understand it. But I was playing Walkabout Mini Golf in VR with some friends yesterday, and we ended up talking about a song in a game that sounded like Sum 41. So it was just very, very odd.
You know what happens if tomorrow or sometime in the very near future something comes up about Sum 41 again?
I'm gonna get a fat lip.
That, or you're going to summon Sum 41.
Or that,
Yeah.
3 times in a row. But yeah, no, that's...
pretty cool.
Yes.
Well, that's Slayin 2. Great game, great soundtrack. This is going to be near impossible to pick our favorites. But
I've already chosen.
This is the time of the episode where we do such a thing. My pick is the Tested in the Southern Grasslands. The Fatty Boom Batty bass.
100%. Same.
Bow, bow, bow.
Yeah, that was a really good pick. I think my second favorite is probably my Graveyard's Curses and the Undead track.
Was that the one I was like getting giddy? No, that wasn't the one I was getting giddy about.
I think that was Showdown with a Giant Dragon.
Yes, that's my second favorite.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? What's your favorite of these picks that we picked?
Of these picks, that's tough. You know, I don't even.
He's gonna say Goblin Builders Guild.
I was going to say
probably.
that.
Yeah. Or is it just the Home Improvement theme song? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Long Forgotten Ancient Library. I think of these ones. Listening to them all back again. That one, I must have channeled something. I don't know what I was going for. It felt the most nostalgic for me.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, Matt, as always, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And this was a long time coming, but I'm glad we finally got to sit down and talk about Slayin 2. Thanks to the developer as well for hiring you. I hope he paid you lots and lots of money for this epic soundtrack. What is going on with you? What are you working on right now? And what can you talk about?
Well, I don't have a lot going on, so I can talk about whatever I want. Nice. I have one project on the go for NES music, actually, of all things, coming out. So NES is coming. I'm doing more NES music.
Oh, my
I can't
goodness.
believe it.
I'm stoked.
Yeah, so that's going to be, I hope we start that before the start of the new year, but I don't know. I don't know how it goes on the other end, so I'm just waiting for them to give me the paper. I'll sign it, and we'll get going. But, in the meantime, what I've been doing is nonstop, like, streaming my comedy show, which is, like, basically stand-up comedy for people that like retro video games.
He does this thing on Twitch where it's a very elaborate setup from what I've seen if you go on his Twitch. So we'll leave links down below. And you stream for like a good long while, if I recall, like a couple hours at a clip.
Oh, dude, it's like nowadays it's 8 hours straight. It's basically 8 hours of improv comedy with a very elaborate, like stupefyingly elaborate graphical setup. It's amazing what you can do with a green screen. But I basically, when the lockdowns happened, I didn't really have a lot of work going on, and I needed something to do with all that creativity. So I basically channeled the full might of my ridiculous music writing tendencies and put it all into graphics. I want to make this stream sort of fun to watch at any given point. I'm not like there's like genres to streaming where people are just playing a game and you're kind of hanging out with them, but I really do try and make it like a show. It's kind of like a really long frickin' show. But that's basically the longest project I've ever been a part of is that show. So it's my pride and joy right now. It's kind of what I work on the hardest. But the music is what pays the bills.
Right. Yeah. Right. Very cool.
Awesome.
Before we go, man, I really appreciate you guys having me on for this. I know, Mike, we've been talking about having this one on. Just fate didn't align back in the day, and that I totally understand. But I'm glad that you still kept with it, and even after all these years, you're like, no, we want to talk about that game.
Yes.
I really appreciate you giving me a chance to relive this soundtrack, because it really is. In a lot of ways, it was the last soundtrack I ever wrote, because I haven't written a full-length soundtrack since this one. And I feel like if more people heard it or knew about it, like maybe it would lead to other soundtracks. But it really did feel like it kind of got buried in the snow somehow. And so it's nice for you guys to actually let me have a little chance to talk about this one again.
Yeah, for sure. I remember talking about this one quite a bit when it came out. So, yeah, you keep creating and we'll keep having you on. So, we're stoked for more NES Norrin Radd.
Absolutely.
Stoked for that. So, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, guys.
So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Chris Myers, Scott Brackett, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Nick Davis, and Ryan McPherson.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/XVGM Radio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you at the end of the show and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at facebook.com/groups/xvgmradio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks, or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those sites is @XVGMRadio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
All right, so Justin, in 1 month, we're coming back with episode 97, and we are being joined once again by one of our favorite people, other than Matt, one of our favorite people who's coming back.
Yeah, so episode 97 is going to be the first episode of 2023, and anybody who's been listening to the show for more than 2 years knows that we start every new year with a special episode with Nico Tengoku.
Yep.
So we're going to be talking about Super Famicom exclusives, SNES, but only in Japan.
So SFC.
So SFC, exactly.
That's right. Games that only came out in Japan. There's some amazing Japanese exclusive soundtracks, and we're going to dive deep into them. I know Nico's bringing the fire on this one, so it's going to be great. And it's going to be silly.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a good time. We're going to ring in the new year as we have and should.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this is Mike.
And Justin.
Signing off for XVGM Radio. All right. You have returned. I don't know if you knew that, but you have returned to XVGM Radio. You are back. Welcome back. That was long. Nope.
No, it wasn't.
No, that was not long. It's because I saw your stupid cursor.
It's not my cursor.
Whose cursor is that? Is that Matt's cursor? That is. It's Matt. It's Matt's fault.
I have a cursor? Where'd my cursor come from?
All right. Welcome.